Welcome everyone to the SABER webinar, in which we're going to take a look at 5 different ways that business status was used through SABER in Hurricane Florence. And we'll start out right away with taking a look at what we're going to do. I'm going to give you a very brief run through of how SABER information appeared in a variety of different applications in Hurricane Florence. And then we're privileged to have Michael Dossett, who's director of the Kentucky Emergency Management Agency and chair of the Central United States Earthquake Consortium, who's going to talk to us a little bit about how and what he saw in the value of bringing SABER information into the regional common operating picture and some of the plans that he has for that. And then we'll get a demonstration of it from Eric and Jeff, who are part of the QSEC GIS group. Then all that was really made possible by some great work that started in the last hurricane season and continued to here with Eric Shreve of the Arizona Emergency Management and Robbie Bagby of Georgia, who created an ArcGIS feature service that makes it much easier for those who use ArcGIS to be able to bring the SABER information in. Then we'll hear, pending meetings and other emergencies that may be happening down at FEMA, from Jonathan Evanson, who's with the FEMA Private Sector Division, about how he used SABER information in the National Business Emergency Operations Center. I was down there on Tuesday, and he was doing a great job, so I hope he can join us today. If not, we'll reschedule him for next month. And then we're going to take a look at a state level. South Carolina Emergency Management Division, using Palmetto Vision, which is a version of the software Cloud EOC, and Rob Zaworski of Earth Technology Integration is going to give us a demonstration of what he was doing there. And then Eric Kantz of Trusted Ops, taking a look at Hurricane Florence Unified Information Portal, which was a private sector effort to draw together lots and lots of different information. So what happened during Hurricane Florence is SABER was used in a new way. As always, automated data goes into XchangeCore, which sits behind SABER, or people can manually upload spreadsheets, as you see down the left-hand side, through the SABER website or the SABER mobile app, teaming with Spot On Response. All go into XchangeCore, which then processes that NEAM-compliant data, a NEAM incident, into GeoJSON format, which Eric and Robbie then used to create a ArcGIS feature service that you can see shown up on a ArcGIS map there, and down at the bottom, the actual feature service information. That happened on Tuesday into Monday, Tuesday, and by Wednesday, things were happening. Early closures, and traditionally we would look at that as on the SABER status map on the SABER website, one way to do it. Few closures there. Early closures again shown here on Google Earth, another way that information is grabbed by SABER. And this is the new combination of the feature service and the app that Robbie built, and then Eric modified, and then this one is Robbie launching this and hosting it for the SABER community. On Wednesday, 57 openings. So we moved into Thursday, numbers doubled right away as that hurricane got closer and closer to being striking. And here adding some of the hurricane tracking information. And throughout Thursday, we also added a whole new visualization portal. Here's the one that Eric Kant will be talking about, the Hurricane Florence Unified Information Portal, where SABER was one of the elements, along with many, many others in multiple categories that Eric will talk about, and we're moving up to 136 closings now. Later on that day and into Friday, Robbie introduced us to Kevin Armstrong, who's a GIS solutions engineer with Esri Public Safety in Charlotte. And he added the feature layer to the 2018 hurricane maps and layers that Esri publishes. So we got a broader audience for the first time to be able to consume the SABER information. By Friday morning, the numbers were really climbing. 385 closures reported, here you see. And we added a new partner in the QSEC RCOP that you'll be hearing about shortly, as we moved up to 473 closures. Saturday, we added a whole new company. Even in the middle of this, it was easy enough to bring in 7-Eleven and create a monitoring system for them. So we have 7-Eleven as a partner in SABER now. And really reached the largest numbers of closures on Sunday. Here's the Unified Information Portal at 575, growing further to 581 in the QSOC RCOP, and finally reaching the peak of 596 of about 1,250 stores monitored in that general area that you see there. We started out each emergency with an estimate of what the scope of the emergency is going to be, monitor stores in that area, and are able to then see the percentages of growth of the number of outages that takes place or store closures that take place. Monday, major move back to business. By Monday afternoon, we were down to 207. Obviously, the store had passed, but it was also time for business to get back into business. Later on that day, dropped to 195. Tuesday, more openings down to 195. On Tuesday, pushed it down to 138 here in the RCOP as we went through Tuesday. And then yesterday, Wednesday, getting back to normal, 54 closures being reported. So with that as an overview of the way the SABER context was used, let me introduce Mike Dossett, who is Director of the Kentucky Emergency Management Agency and Chair of QSEC, the Central United States Earthquake Consortium. Mike?
So, hey, Jim, thanks for your time this morning and for the time of the group. I'll take this opportunity to talk a little bit about what we're going to do in featuring and highlighting the good work that has gone on and continues to make an impact in the private sector from SABER. So Jim and I met, a very short story, Jim and I met at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce private sector. It was a workshop in D.C. several months ago. Great meeting, and obviously that's a great time for networking. We met. I certainly have known about SABER for a good while, but had never been introduced to Jim. It was a good meeting. So by way of explanation, I'm the chairman of the Central U.S. Earthquake Consortium, QSEC, and we host a portal called the RCOP. That is the Regional Common Operating Picture. It's very similar to a lot of information sharing sites you see around the country, and it features a distribution of data via portal. So we talked a great deal about having some connectivity with SABER, which is a slightly different lane from what the RCOP features currently. We're featuring a lot of state-based data. QSEC involves eight states with 10 associate states, so we pull in a lot of infrastructure data. But the ability to use the private sector data and get that out is very powerful. So some of the things we talked about are how technology exists and what forms it exists in right now. We haven't quite mastered the way to push out the data in blue sky days or gray sky days right now, but we're working through that. So I'm also the director of Kentucky Emergency Management, and we have a variety of slots in NEMA, the National Emergency Management Association, and all of our directors, myself included, are looking for information that support private sector involvement. We're looking not so much at a picture or a data board. We want something that assists us in making decisions. So I kind of group that into a term that we all know, decision support. So Florence is, the story goes on. Florence is heading up the East Coast. I called Jim. I gave him a cold call off the cuff. And quite frankly, I don't like cold calls. But Jim, as he always is, was very gracious, and I asked if we could talk a little bit about working to maybe push SABER forward in a very quick operational way. So Jim has integrated the data in SABER, and we in turn retooled a space on the RCOP very quickly. The RCOP's been in development with G&H International and our group efforts in all 8 states for about 2 years now. We're now we'll be in the 4th iteration of development, and that's funded through a partnership with DHS S&T, and I know that Jim has a very good relationship with S&T and is also featuring a project with SABER. So I had Jim on the phone. I said, would you be willing to give us the opportunity to share the data and how private sector would like to see it, how it works, how we can push it out through the RCOP? And on that particular call, we pulled in Eric and Jeff, who both work for G&H, and we chatted just a very few minutes. The bottom line is, at that moment, Kentucky was pushing a number of EMAC teams out the door to assist, to assist Mike Sprayberry in North Carolina. Mike is the director there. We're good friends and colleagues, along with Kim Stinson in South Carolina, the director there. Both of them facing a crisis from Florence, which brought a very big impact. So we're basically pushing forward. The key to all this is the private sector. I'm a proponent. I started Kentucky's private sector program back in 2009 after the ice storm. Private sector is the key to recovering from disasters. We know that. One of the main topics in the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the workshop that brought that forward was based on everything that the private sector brings to the table. How do we allow them to do their work and get out of their way during a hurricane event? It is a real big piece of the puzzle that government has not quite mastered yet. We need to know what's not working, how it can be fixed, and who can do the work. So a big deal was a fuel and the fuel issue and the point of sale and tens of thousands of customers down in North Carolina or up in North Carolina and South Carolina were in crisis as Florence pushed into landfall. So the RCOP, the decision to use the RCOP was based on the ability to very quickly build an entry into the portal, and that was accomplished in record time by Eric and Jeff. We certainly appreciate their efforts. So basically, we pushed forward. Technology is the answer in solving most of these problems, and it's about getting the information out to the people who need it. So very quickly, Eric and Jeff did the heavy lifting. You'll see some of that coming up in the presentation here. So the partnership between SABER and QSEC and our variety of partners around the country are seen as a major opportunity to link the two and push that link forward in Shaken Fury. Shaken Fury is the FEMA national exercise that will take place in the first week of June in 2019. We've been in the planning curve for about a year. Actually, the New Madrid plan has been under rewrite for the past 2 years in 4 FEMA regions. So we're on board with FEMA and all the entities involved in that. In fact, Kentucky is the lead state for the QSEC group in the FEMA planning. Actually, the exercise division adopted QSEC's goals as the goal of the national exercise. So again, connectivity and infrastructure is the name of the game here. It's all about getting the information, making it timely, vetting it as best as possible, and then pushing it out to our partners, both government and private sector. The obvious elements of information we've already mastered, the power outage data, a variety of different outages and infrastructure, but we haven't quite got the private sector link down yet. So in a very short time, the link between SABER and the ARCOP, and quite frankly, SABER and a number of portals to push this out during the disaster was put up and was working. The story has a very good ending. I'm quite sure that the information assisted companies, corporations, and industry in safe recovery during that time. So with that, Jim, I can't thank SABER enough for the partnership and for the opportunity to immediately retool a delivery method for QSEC up on the ARCOP portal from a cold call. Again, we're going to remain partners with SABER, and thank you for the opportunity to make us all better. And I'll turn it back to you.
Well, thank you very much, Mike. Appreciate that background information and the kind words. And Eric and Jeff, let's see what we're talking about.
So what Director Dossett was kind of laying out for us in the approach for Shaken Fury is kind of the core of what DHS has been doing with QSEC, and that is, in blue sky normal operations is establishing sharing practices, governance, and rules around how content is shared and how it is presented back to the community. And what you have here in the slide deck is a very mature vision of the partnership of Department of Homeland Security's Science and Technology Directorate, the Central U.S. Earthquake Consortium, and the core member states represented on the left side there for QSEC. And what we've been working on over the years that's really pretty darn exciting is the realization of all of the authoritative content being maintained by our state partners in QSEC has value with the broader community. And we say broader community, we reflect what FEMA has been directing us on, which is whole of community. It's a critical component. And by leveraging a consumer off-the-shelf cloud environment called ArcGIS Online that's maintained and built by ESRI, we're able to be very nimble, as Director Dossett noted. Once Mr. Morentz got with Eric and I and fine folks at Arizona, we're able to get that content and make some very quick but informative products out of the SABER content. So thanks, everybody, on that. And I can't see in my screen, Eric, if the far right's cut off or not, but the far right of the slide is the critical component of today's meeting, which is about how that content gets put in to support the lifelines. All these various private sector and whole community partners are either recipients or contributors to situational awareness around the lifelines. And in Hurricane Florence, it was very apparent, as Director Dossett and Jim in your slides noted, is we had the peak of outages on Sunday and then started seeing the slow recovery efforts starting to take place. And having a SABER content come in and be able to be combined with the whole community, the value add of the store statuses being submitted, Jim, by your community was realized in a very positive way. And so, the end of the day, we're trying to state and push towards, as you can see here in the graphic, you can share content to the QSEC information sharing portal, but as importantly is you can also get out of it. You can take the raw data as you see fit. You can interact with some pretty simple turnkey applications that Eric's going to show here that give you that actionable content that will inform the lifeline decisions. And the whole critical component is gaining and maintaining the situational awareness so that we can keep the initiative in recovery efforts that are coming up soon. And I think, Jim, I love what you're doing and promoting is that, we're about to wrap up, the response efforts and start going to the recovery. And this community and practice here of establishing the sharing protocols is going to be really important as we go into the response effort, which is going to take months, if not years. And with that, I'm going to pass over to my colleague, Mr. Eric Enderlot, to kind of walk through the approach and who we work with. Go ahead, Eric.
All right, thank you, Jeff. And I'm just going to go into this mode because it did look like the screen was getting cut off a little bit. So I wanted to just go over the basic workflow for what we did over the past week, and really want to emphasize that, we were just, I'd say we're doing the easy part. We're consuming the information that was shared by SABER, as Jim described, shared as a GeoJSON format, and partners with Arizona Department of Emergency Management. They converted that to a really friendly, accessible ArcGIS Online feature service and shared that with ArcGIS Online publicly. So with that, we were able to consume that information and build a dashboard from it. And the dashboard's nothing that special. It is an effective way of visualizing the information, and it's a fairly easy and a quick thing to stand up if you have that important data already formed. So the one thing that we did add on to the process was we developed a kind of an aggregate look of the data. So we summarized the business disruption at the county level using a Python process in a serverless computing environment on Amazon Lambda. And that's being updated every 30 minutes based on the data that Jim is sharing and Arizona is republishing. So with that, we'll go through a brief demo. If I could find my browser. There we go. So this is the operations dashboard view for the SABER data that we were consuming. And as you can see, we're down to about 47 outages in the affected area. So on the left side, we put together a small panel just describing what the dashboard is presenting and some of the sources of information and how often it's updated, and links for additional information. So we can move that aside. And the display is very map focused. We're looking at the location of outages. I have a summary on the left side of the total outages and breakdowns in various different ways. And there's a layer list on the right side, so you can turn on and off different layers. This is the aggregated county outage data that I was describing. So, with this, you can click on any of the counties and get an estimate or an aggregate count of businesses disrupted in each county. I also did make some minor modifications to the symbology. So we're looking at the different types of businesses affected in the Atlantic area here. So there's simple filtering that you can do. So if we just want to look at the food businesses that are affected in North Carolina, you can do that easily with this bar chart and then clear the filter. And we've got a couple of other different summaries on the bottom left based on business type and the actual business owner. I also added a timeline view of when the businesses were first added into the system. And I think this offers some promise to kind of look at the cadence or tempo of disruption to the private sector community over time, and as business is restored, being able to basically measure that aspect, so the recovery effort and how quickly that's going. So this is the operations dashboard as kind of a standalone element. So I wanted to show you how we've incorporated that into the larger CUSEC regional common operating picture. So this, I just jumped over to the CUSEC RCOP. This is the tabbed view, and we have a private sector tab in here. We just added during this storm event. So same view we were looking at earlier. There are different tabs going across the top based on ESF, so we could look at disruption to the power grid, and so on, for the QSEC region. We also have kind of a more traditional COP kind of viewer built in here, which offers another way of looking at the data and accessing data. So I'm just going to show you a really quick demonstration on how we can pull in the SABER data, which we haven't formally added into the layer list for the COP, but with this add data widget, you can interactively find data that's shared online and bring it into the viewer. So I'm going to add this. Let's see, we'll add the SABER point data. And just as a point of comparison, I'll also add communication status data from the FCC that we're bringing into the RCOP as another layer. So this is showing the impact to the cellular network, and you can see there's a good deal of overlap, as you would expect, between the business disruption and impact to the cell network. So this is a way to start to kind of build on a single layer to be able to get some insight by adding different spatial layers together and seeing what types of interactions there are. So with that, I will jump out of the demo and let's get back to the PowerPoint. Jeff, you want to conclude with what's coming up?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Eric. So, a couple of things. One is QSEC is open for, as Director Dossett stated, for collaboration with this and other efforts. We're going to be working on this with FEMA's NEB for Shake and Fury. So I'm just so thankful, Jim, for your collaboration with us, Mr. Morentz, and looking forward to expanding upon what was done here for Shake and Fury and continuing the research for this. So thanks again, Jim.
My pleasure, and great job, guys. It was, as always, good working with you. And one of the things that we'll be doing in the future, I hope, is bouncing ideas back and forth and seeing all the different things that we can extend. Eric, I've passed it over to you, the other Eric. We have three Erics presenting today. And Eric Shreve from Arizona Department of Military Emergency and Military Affairs. And take it away, Eric. Appreciate your participating today.
Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're at in the country. As Jim said, my name's Eric Shreve. I'm with Arizona Emergency Management. And basically, I'm going to kind of give you a technical demo, I guess, on the sense of the way we process the data from SABER as a GeoJSON format and then output it as a feature service that can be consumed through the RTS Online, as well as the dashboard configuration that you saw. So basically, the code and the concept, I worked with Robbie on this, Robbie Bagley out of Georgia EM, to basically find a way to consume the data and then bring it into that format. I had another project I was working on that was looking at GeoJSON, and I tried to figure out a way. So basically, the ArcGIS API for Python, essentially through Jupyter Notebook, you create the code essentially, and more or less, I mean, the code's fairly basic. There's not a lot of, technical pieces to it. It's more or less just retrieving the GeoJSON or data and then processing it out as a feature service. The way that I went about making it so basically you could process it every hour without being around is downloading the script essentially through Jupyter Notebook, and then putting it on our server, one of our servers basically, and setting up a Windows task schedule basically to consume and process this Python workflow every hour basically, so you have the latest and greatest data at all times. The process just appends the data, or excuse me, it overwrites the data. It doesn't append it. So basically, every hour you're getting a new, fresh point data set that you can see here. The feature service, I mean, again, it gives an overview of just what the process is kind of following, and more or less that's kind of the basis of that. It was fairly straightforward, and I think it's awesome that people in the community were using it for using their visual and web applications, because obviously trying to consume a GeoJSON or a KML file type through ArcGIS Online isn't as intuitive as if it was in a feature service format. So that's kind of the overview of that. I will be posting this code on GitHub, and basically, if you want to go and construct it and manipulate it on your own, by all means, pass it over to Robbie and see what his demo is as well. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Eric. Very much appreciate your hosting this for the Hurricane. Look forward to working with you in the future. Now, over to Robbie.
Hello, everyone. My name is Robbie Bagby. I'm the GIS coordinator for Georgia Emergency Management and Homeland Security Agency. And I'm going to briefly talk about a little bit more of the aspects of bringing the data in via a few different other methods. If you guys have never heard of GeoEvent Server, I would definitely recommend looking into it. It's another automation process, a way to bring in the feed, and you can do things like telling the software to just append the data if you want to. If you don't want to override every single time and you want to have something to look at for after action review, you can just append the data every time it comes in. That way you've got a full data set of every single thing that came across. Our GeoEvent's currently down right now because we're upgrading to the newest version of Enterprise. So we didn't have that available for the storm. But this is another alternative. If you can see my screen here, this is data interoperability. It's an extension that you can download for Arc Desktop. And there's a bunch of different connectors in here that you can use to process different types of data. So what you can see is I've got a JSON feature here coming in, and you can plug the URL directly into that. And then it creates a vertex because it finds the geometry inside of the different objects nested within that JSON feed. And then I like to create a geodatabase connection, which you can see here. That stages the data. From there, you can publish that out to ArcGIS Online so that the schema is going to match once you actually hook up the feature service connector. So I disconnected that and then hooked it up to a feature service connector. So now the data is being pushed directly into ArcGIS Online. And you can just run this however often you want to. But the advantages of GeoEvent is that it's running on a server, and you can tell it to update the data, every 10 seconds if you want to. So that's the advantages of that. And then at its most simplest form, if you're not a coder whatsoever, there's a really simple way that you can add this feed to ArcGIS Online. So what you're looking at is, I believe, one of the test feeds that you can get back as a response from the API for the GeoJSON. And you can just right-click this. I mean, this doesn't make sense at all when you look at it. It's just a bunch of JSON. So you can save this as a GeoJSON file. It wants to save it as a JSON by default, but I always like to put GeoJSON as the file extension at the end and then save that. And then you can come into ArcGIS Online, and first you want to add that as an item. That's going to create the feature service for you to eventually update. So I have that's the file that I saved there. And then you can publish this as a hosted layer inside ArcGIS Online. So that gets you started. Now, if you want to update this, you can just come to the feature service that was created, and you can either append data to the layer, or you can overwrite the entire layer. So the easiest way is just to overwrite the entire thing. A I'll go back here. You see I haven't updated this layer since September 10th. We were using the solution engineer, Kevin Armstrong, his layer that he created, and he actually created that on GeoEvent Server. But there was an issue with it for some reason. It started not working during the activation for the storm. So we switched over to using Eric's layer as it was working just fine. So I don't know what happened there. But I haven't updated this layer since September 10th. So we can update this with the GeoJSON file that I just downloaded. Go ahead and upload that and overwrite that. It usually takes less than a minute to overwrite the entire data set. And I'm not going to sit here and watch it for time purposes, but it's really that easy just to grab the file, save it, and overwrite it in ArcGIS Online, and you have the freshest data set available. Once you have your workflow in place for updating the feature service, you move on to the WebMap creation, because this is what's going to feed all the application templates that are in ArcGIS Online, whether it be Operations Dashboard, Web App Builder, or some of the other things that they have. So you can see the SABER feed in here that we're bringing in. And again, this is coming from Eric's layer over there in Arizona. And another thing that you have access to with ArcGIS Online is the subscription layers, or the the Living Atlas. This is where I got the active hurricanes layer that showed the forecast error cone, the track, the wind speeds, and things like that. And that's part of the subscriber content that you get access to as being a user inside of ArcGIS Online. And actually, as the webinar started, I found this recent hurricanes layer, so I thought that would be important to show just as an after-action review for where the storm actually went. So I went ahead and added that in and filtered it by Florence, which was the hurricane. So you've got a lot of different layers that you can add that you have access to that is curated content by Esri that they are constantly updating every 5 minutes sometimes. So that was a crucial layer to add to get perspective according to all these closures. So once you have your map created and you have all your configurations, in this case we created a custom pop-up, which you can do. You can just come into the layer and configure that here, and you can create a any type of HTML will go in here, and you can see we've got replacement tokens for the attributes. So it will dynamically pull from each record according to what that replacement token is that we've set inside of the pop-up. So you can do that. You can create expressions that create data from data, essentially. So there's a lot of different things you can do inside the web map. But we won't cover all that today. So you want to share this out. You have the option to sharing it to the public, just your organization, or to just members of certain groups. And then from there you can create a web app. Operations Dashboard is really awesome for emergency management because it is tailor-fitted for showing live data feeds as they update. But I actually created a web app builder version of the Operations Dashboard for this event. So that's what that looks like. Once you have your map set up, you create a web application with it. And like I said, this is the web app builder dashboard theme. And as you can see, it's using that SABER Business Disruptions map that I created. As far as the widgets go, there's a bunch of different widgets that you have access to creating in here. I just created a few. You can see that the summarization is built off of the count of total features. And you can set that statistic here with all the different displays and indicators. And I also have a chart here that I've configured to show the category of the business that was closed. So it's displaying the feature counts by category. So pretty easy stuff to configure. And I also configured a filter if you want to go back a certain amount of hours. So if we want to just see say what's happened over the past 4 hours, there's been 2 records that have been entered into the system. So between what QSEC's shown you and what I've shown you, there's a bunch of different ways that you can configure these things. And I like to look at other people's applications because it gives me ideas on how to configure ours. So I believe that is all I have for you guys. That's how we collaborated with Eric over there in Arizona to bring in the data that he was automating. I believe every hour he was making updates. So that's how we brought it in and created a web application for a common operating system.
Thank you so much for that. Eric and Robbie, I mean, super look at under the covers there and how you pulled everything together. That was great. And we're going to shift, you're in Georgia, we're going to shift north a little bit to South Carolina. Rob Zaworski, oh, by the way, I did get a note from the NBEOC that Jonathan is fully immersed, so he's not going to be able to pull away. Yeah, I was just saying that Jonathan Evison and FEMA is not going to be able to join us, but we're going to set him up next week or next month. I've got a promise for that one. So Rob Zaworski, who is with Earth Technology Integration, that is the contractor to South Carolina for the development of their entire common operating picture and incident management software. And I'll just turn it over to you, Rob.
Hey, Jim. I just thought I'd show something a little different. We have something similar with we use the WAB, and actually we'd like to get hold of that SABER widget. That would be great. Right now, where we've been using SABER mostly is display on the map, things like ESF24 use bringing the resource requests. But having that widget, that would actually be really nice. And our service is typical. It's your AWS container-based microservice, Kubernetes, all that good stuff. And on average, and the agencies that usually use our system on dailies, it's a couple hundred people daily from either the EMD or Department of Health or the National Guard from South Carolina or the hospitals. So there's usually a couple hundred people at any one time on the system. When this ramped up, we went to a couple thousand, and using your microservice, Kubernetes, AWS stuff, it's actually really, that's not a problem. So that kind of technology is really come along in the past couple of years and is really nice to not have to worry about scaling. But what I'm showing you here is actually a very non-GIS way of showing all of our apps. We have about 50 of them. Have a map component, but they can be used without a map. And what we did there was, the idea was when we created any interface, the idea was we call it mobile first, which is where when we design any of our interfaces, we start from how will this look on mobile, and we make sure it works on mobile, and then we escalate it up to the desktop. And that's been a really interesting experience. But what has also been interesting is that people, when they're given new technology, even you think, wow, this is really, and they'll say it's really cool. But when you're introducing it into a pipeline of processes that they're used to, it's a step to then get them to change, even if they recognize, well, this is better. So one of the things that we've had success on now that people, we've sort of been pushing people towards it, is the mobile version. And so I'm going to go, this is actually pulling live data right now from South Carolina. So from there, you can check on things like resource requests, and it brings up your that type of thing, where it has all the information. You can also go in and actually manage resource requests, and I'll show you what our interfaces look like there. Where is it? And so we have a lot of, this is my version, so there's a lot of apps on here. And you can go in, and then you can see, I'll go into one. Everything is laid out very nicely for working on a mobile, application. And it was interesting. I remember I was at Vigilant Guard, and one of the colonels was standing up at the map, and he's pointing at the map. He's going, I can't tell how many shelters are open. And I'm thinking, well, I went to show them this. I'm like, well, you can tell how many shelters are here pretty easily. So we can go in here. We can go sort. If you want to know how many are full, and then apply. It was a case of, people love the map. I understand why they use the map, but sometimes maybe the information you're getting, like how many are full, is easier to look at in another format. And again, that's getting used to people working a different way, because it's always go to the map, go to the map, go to the map. Which you know, in this case, there was a different way of getting that same information. You know, we have everything from power outages, of course. Oh, wait, no, that one's not displaying colon correctly. From shelters, obviously, big shelters. There's also, we can do everything from, this is an interesting one, this is location services. What you see there is actually two people reporting from the application. When you start up, I'll show you in a second, but let's see where the second guy is. Fernandez is at, right now, we can tell where he is. There's his location. The way that's done is, if you go to the front of the application, you see to the right of the house, there's a little symbol. You just click on that, hit OK, and now I'm broadcasting my location. You can see it appeared there on the side there. Rob Zworski, we go in there, and it'll say, oh, my latitude and longitude. Oh, there it is. Oh, no, it didn't find it. It found the city. No, it didn't find the city. It found the state and the zip. So it's not always 100% on. But anyway, with the map, that also is displayed in the map, and there's a moving track and all that kind of nice stuff. But again, we try and keep it all useful and mobile, and it's getting people to work that way. So all you do is switch it off, and now I'm not broadcasting anymore. That's an interesting feature for letting people know, like if you have to be somewhere at a certain time, you just come in, tap it, and it's a way of sort of self-reporting your check-in and check-out. We have other things like file library, all that normal stuff. We have video wall, another pretty common use of things. That all works over, over a cellular phone. We can actually do 9 screens there, but on the iPhone it gets a little small. Yeah, you can see we have an entire quite a list here. Now, normally a user does not have these many options. This is just because it's obviously my system that we have, quite a lot. We have a chat feature, which is your normal, coming in chat and such. One of the neat things with the chat feature is you can send out, because the hard part about chat is getting people to chat with you. So we actually have a feature where you can go into chat and you can do a chat meeting, which sends out SMS and email requests to people, and they click on that and they're brought into the chat meeting. We have a lot of features like that. But that's where we are at this point. And like I said, I know they've been using SABER with ESF24 and resource requests. If I get hold of that widget, I think we could do some interesting stuff and bring it into the lab. So if you could hook me up with whoever did that'd be great. And that's about it.
Well, thank you very much, Rob.
For the record.
Yep, appreciate that. Have turned presenter over to Eric Kant. Rob, that was a great look at a non-geospatial way to process the same kind of data. So very, very nice touch with this. Now let's go to Eric, who brings everything in. This is the Unified Information Portal is a beautiful example of being able to use the information that is part of the burgeoning internet access that we have. So, Eric Kant, you're on.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep, gotcha.
Yes, sir. Okay, perfect. Hey, thank you so much for having me, Jim. I know we've been working together on information interoperability for over a decade. And while I do love my GIS friends and their common operational picture, I find working in an EOC for many years as an emergency manager and a technologist that a common operational picture is not always common to everybody. And so we prefer to have a user-defined operating picture. And what I'd like to show you today is both enabled by curated data from people who understand the business, and then we're utilizing a product developed for the intelligence community by InQtel for disparate intelligence teams to bring information sets together and work on them in real time in a task force. And so I'm going to show you some of the items behind the portal and how this was put together for us. And here on the home page, we've broken everything out by the lifeline and some graphics. These all update automatically from their sources.
as well as accessing some of the API information. This happens to be all the closable roads. You'll notice any of our graphics are completely integrated with the data sources that produces them. So clicking on elements in the graphics will actually change data in the screen for you. And this all happens through the web interface, through a user-defined operational builder. And here you can see we have the Army Corps of Engineers map embedded. And I'd like to show in the next couple of minutes 4 or 5 different ways to consume SABER data. And here, very simply, the GEMA folks did a phenomenal job on their application, and so we embedded that right here in the page under the daily operations brief, but also included with this are the FEMA briefing points, lifelines, and we could add any additional graphics that we want. And so if we're just visualizing data, this is all pretty simple to do. But often you want to do more than just visualize. You want to actually orchestrate, process, and correlate this data. So along those ends, we've actually taken that information here, and this is a feed from SABER directly, and we can actually then process and visualize, but more than just process and visualize, I can take additional data sets and now incorporate them and combine them in real time right through the web page. So if I wanted to take this SABER data and now correlate it with another disparate data source that maybe has a unique key to correlate it with or not, I could. If not, I can actually come in and create the keys on the fly between the systems and actually edit those parameters and change the definition. So as soon as a new data source shows up, we bring it into the unified, into the user-defined operating picture, and then we can put that data together in real time. And just like the other graphics, selecting anything in the graphic allows you to query your data. So if I select this section here, we can see the graphs change in relation to that information. And then I can further query this down. So now if I just wanted to see KFC, it would bring that up or do other feature searches. In the background, this is using what's called a no-code, low-code development environment. And this allows you to not have to go back to engineering and work at the speed of the operation. So you can see right here, this is how we're accessing that SABER data and pumping it into a page. And if I click on any of the nodes, we can see all the detailed elements that I can do. So here I'm cleaning some of the data, and we can see those delimiter splits and other activities, and you can see all the different choices that you have here. But when I want to really get advanced in some of these capabilities, we can add stuff to this like any of the other nodes you see here on the left. So if I want to add filters or alerts, I just drag and drop this alert over here. I can grab this, put this together, and then define who that alert goes to, or what I want that alert to go to, or to a database, or execute code, or get very advanced and train and predict machine learning algorithms. And so the system has multiple machine learning algorithms built right in that I can just comment. If I could grab the right point here, you get the idea. I can just, there we go, train it. And now I can start to train multiple machine learning algorithms and then use them to do predictions. And everything you're looking at here is actually a program. So let me take these components out since they don't do anything right now. And we can run this right through the web page. All of these components can be worked on by multiple analysts at the same time, so we can share all of them in real time and adjust them. We can clone them. You can also do very interesting techniques. So let's say I needed to share this with another analyst in another system. I can actually cut and paste this code all out and send it to them. So you can see here I cut and pasted the code. I can send it to them, and then they can use it in their system. So a very flexible tool, and you can see how the intelligence community would leverage this as disparate teams come together and combine disparate data sources. To show you one example of the machine learning and vision analytics that are built in, we actually created a page that goes out and scrapes social media data, and we're actually processing this through a visual learning API that takes the pictures, and you can see here it's identified, tried to identify what's in the picture using a neural network machine learning components. And clicking on any of these items, just like everything else. And we can see here it thinks it's from a website, 39%, maybe a scoreboard, 8%. But we can then use this to automatically pull out relative information, like damage assessment or others from social media or any other images that come in. And so I know we're running out of time here. Before I finish up, I just wanted to show you how quickly it was to put some of this stuff together. So here's our SABER data that's been brought in a raw format. I can just very quickly come in here and select what I want in my dashboard. If I don't know what I want, I can quickly select a multiple components. Let's do a smaller one. Multiple components and say create. And it'll create this new quick dashboard for me that allows me to interrogate all the SABER data and determine how best to apply it. I can then take any of these objects and drop them onto any page for anyone to view or further adjust them. And right now, because this came from one data set, all of these are completely interconnected already. I don't have to do anything else. If I'm ready, I can just share this out to the public or to an internal audience by clicking the share button here. And so if I want to share this to anyone in the public, one of the interesting items is that we can also share it encrypted, and I can do vanity URLs. So essentially, everybody could have their own user-defined operating picture based on their requirements, what they want to see, their data sources, and then we can start to put that together, and a vanity URL allows me to see every time the commander has clicked on that page and used it. And so not just do we get all the charts and maps, and so here I'm just going to add, let's just add a map to this, which can be Esri-based or not. If I wanted to add the GEMA map on the same page, that's as simple as adding a web clip. And let me just grab the URL real quick. My little URL list here, and here's the GEMA URL. And adding this and embedding it in the page is really just this simple. You can see here it works. And then we can add this in. Make it a web page to make it a little bit easier to do. And so you can see right here is the GEMA page starting to load, and all I need to do is resize this, and we can add this in. I can also add KML components if needed. You saw the little magic add content button here. If we wanted to add a live time video from a drone feed, I can now add this video feed. And this happens to be some drone video that I pulled off of YouTube, nothing special, but if we had video from a drone, we could actually multicast that. And this page is now deliverable to whoever I want to deliver to. And this is exactly how we built out the private sector portal with the disparate data sources that we find. So every time we find a source, we determine the best way to access that data, whether we want to process it or not. You can see here that these are indeed interconnected. If I do a query on the map, it'll search my data source for me. And every one of these components is a laundry list of configurable elements for usage. And it's not just GeoJSONs. We combine 27 different data sources, disparate data sources, so I can choose Excel, CSV, data feeds, streams, databases. If I don't have them, I can create them. If I wanted to add files, let's say from the latest road closure reports or some other system, I can add these and just upload this file, and this becomes an element now for visualization. We can see it right here loading up. And I can now configure my page. And this all happens, if we want to update this, we can update it. If we want to automate it, we go back to our low-code, no-code development environment, and we can automate this whole process. And right here in real time, I'll run this so you can actually watch the program run in the background. We get all green lines, and we now have our new source of data. And so I know that was pretty quick, and we ran out of time here, but you can always find me on LinkedIn, and I'm more than happy to do additional, deeper presentations. We use this to orchestrate and automate everything from cybersecurity to intelligence data to disaster data. And so, Jim, as always, thank you so much for your time today.
Great application of the SABER data. We've seen GIS, geospatial approaches, we've seen textual approaches, we've seen analytical, we've seen in EOC, we've seen mobile. Out of these 4 different ways in which SABER data is used. And that simply emphasizes the value of organizations that focus on their data. Applications abound, brilliance abounds, as you have seen about the brilliant minds that have been played out here today. And it all begins with the data. So one of the things that SABER continues to do is focus on that data, focus on transforming disparate forms of data using XchangeCore into multiple output formats, and thus making it available to the brilliance that lies in the data visualization skills and applications that are out there. So we are proud and maintain our vigilance in being a data source, and encourage everybody to join SABER, become a provider, become a consumer, and you see up on the screen there where you can get in touch with all of us. And let me just thank everybody for joining today. Had a good audience. And for our presenters, each and every one of you, brilliant, brilliant presentations, and loved it from the concept of why we do this from Mike right to the nitty-gritty of where those digits go. So thank you, everybody. We'll do this again next month, hopefully not reporting on another hurricane. Bye, everybody.